to the Ask a CISSP episode of the Other Side of the Firewall podcast. We talk about the latest and greatest cybersecurity news, as well as we highlight those movers and shakers and glass ceiling breakers, those people of color who've made it to the other side of the proverbial firewall. Speaking of which, on today's episode, I have Mr. Alfredzo Nash. So welcome to the podcast.
Hello, coffee makers.
So you've been seeing a lot of Alfredzo recently. So we had him on for a whole week long. So if you have not checked it out, depending on when this goes out, please go back, check out his episodes. So we had him for a week. I had some great topics. We talked about recorded future. So I know that's one of your topics, right? So you brought it to my attention. I was like, okay, this will be a good follow-up because we talked about it when we did the crossover episode with the Cyber Coffee Hour, which is your podcast, with Dr. Joseph Burtmiller. And then when it came back up, I was like, oh, man, I got to get you on so we can talk about it. So me, you, and was it Daniel?
Daniel.
Yeah. Yep. So we had Daniel, Shannon, yourself on the podcast. So definitely love catching up. But now we got to get a little bit more detail. We're going to get some what they call texture about your background and experience.
Contextual background for the OSINT researchers.
Right. So I'm about to let you take off with it, right? But I just want people to know, like, this is a very, very intelligent gentleman right here. Like, he hits me with a lot of crazy knowledge on LinkedIn, right? When I read his post, I'm like, yo, this is deep. And then he has, comedic flavor as well, right? We were talking about the Infinity Stones. We're talking about, some other comic book stuff. Like, it's a good combination, right? To keep people going. But I just want to make sure people understand you're talking to true intellect on the podcast, right? Like, everybody on here is smart and what have you. But I'm just saying, like, every time I talk to you, like, it gets super deep. Like, oh man, I wasn't ready. I wasn't studied up. Without further ado, right, Mr. Alfredzo Nash from Mount Vernon, New York. Break down your background, your experience for us.
Wow, so that's always the hardest question. So I'll start from the beginning. My interest came from video games. So coming up in Mount Vernon, New York, I mean, like, I always kept a laugh on my heart and a comical situation, like you said. But in the beginning, initially, I got into computers because of one of my cousins. He took apart PlayStation 1. We were trying not to get in trouble. Initially, he broke the PlayStation, and we were like, well, how do we not get in trouble for breaking this brand new PlayStation 1? So I watched him single-handedly take a Casio player apart down to pieces and replace the PlayStation 1. And back then, we didn't know what it was. We didn't even say hacker. It was tinkering, right? And to this day, I have it somewhere in my storage locker, and it works. It's never had an issue.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so from there, I had this hand-me-down Sega Master System and Sega Genesis, and I learned about cheat codes. And every weekend or so, I will ride to my local library in Mount Vernon and print out a copy of cheat codes. Same cousin, I'm going to keep his privacy intact, but the same cousin would figure out how to get free internet. And from that moment, I was like, man, what is this? What is this called? And he was like, I think it's computer science. And many years later, we started going to college together. In that time, we were both security guards, and I started asking some of the professors, like, hey, what should I do in this field? And initially, they said, why don't you try computer science? And I was like, okay, cool. I got a decent grade in math. And prior 20 years ago, I can't even believe I'm saying that. I didn't make it into the Air Force. So initially, I'm talking to the counselor. I'm like, I don't want to be a business guy. I don't want to be a cop, which was criminal justice. I do have law enforcement in my family. So it's kind of like a one-upman thing. I didn't want to do that. Or, at the time, I thought I could work with the FBI, which we talked about offline. But it didn't work out. So in initial discovery, somebody said, try computer science out because you have high math and science scores. And I said, all right. So I gave them my DD-214 and my dad's paperwork. And they said, hey, you placed as a sophomore, and we want to try to get you through your associates into IT. Now, that was a shocker for me because I didn't know how to code. I was very new into computer science. I didn't know anything about particularly much besides tinkering.
Right.
So the first two classes I bombed out, and I was working overnight as a security guard. A year, almost 18 months into it, I get the, probationary warning, like, hey, get your grades together or get kicked out.
Yeah.
I'm laughing about I'm laughing about it now, but I'm crying on the inside because that was the eye opener. I took 12-hour shifts, so I did 12 over 16-hour shifts at night, and I switched to going to class before work instead of after a full night rotation, and that did it. I got my GPA up to about 3.2. And then I graduated with my bachelor's in IT way back in like 2007. And then from there, I was hooked. I went into my first help desk job, which was an eye opener. It was like a pit, right, of guys. Again, I'm the only black guy, right? So it's like a 19-year-old guy in a pit of sysadmin, system engineers, network engineers, help desk folks. And we used to joke because I didn't know what Linux was. I'm freshly out of school. And sysadmin's name is Dave. I won't put his last name out, but he tossed a pack of RHEL 4 CDs at me and said, figure it out.
Oh, man.
So that's how I got my first like enterprise ready Linux. And then I was tinkering with Ubuntu 704 on a throwing out e-machines.
Okay.
So at home I would go and install pretty much Ubuntu 604 and upgrade to 704 from bare metal. And I would use that as the desktop talking to Ubuntu server at my pop's house, at my dad's old apartment. And from there I just went down the rabbit hole. I really can't, I'm skipping and, paraphrasing a little bit, but I said to myself, everyone is running away from Linux. Why won't I learn it? And I guess that was my advantage because when I finally finished up and got this job, I was helping them with warehouse migrations, server builds, desktop clients type stuff, and then I got a knack for database security.
Okay.
And then the recession, I literally say I graduated into the recession with that niche for database security and wound up becoming a junior sysadmin down in Manhattan. Now, there they showed me how to build this, what was this, golden triangle, where we use a Mac server as a domain controller at the time. And we had to migrate off of Windows stamps. It had to have been 2003 back then.
Gotcha.
But it was an antiquated build, antiquated server, and the test was to audit everyone on the floor, on this art gallery floor. And I wrote a silly script to do that and collect all the clients and drop it into a tool called Open Audit.
Okay.
So pissing a few people off, they were like, hey, who saved us like $5,000 audit? I'd like to shake his hand. And that was my sign-on letter. That was my sign-on doing that inside of my 90 days where they dropped a brand new iMac on my desk.
Okay.
And then I laugh because before that everything was like borrowed equipment or used gear, but then that was like a challenge to say, well, what else can you do? And so in that role, I migrated the whole domain and audited the floor just to get laid off after collecting all of the systems, and then wind up making my way into a hardware land role down in Bloomberg. I'm put all this. I was a little ashamed to put it out there because initially I thought like I didn't want people backtracking on my backtrack, but I'm gonna put it back on my LinkedIn because I'm rehashing everything now, and it's kind of I get kind of emotional because I was homeless during this time, so I'm rehashing a little bit of that trauma, but at the same time I'm looking at the level up. So when I got to Bloomberg, it was like this big, shiny, real world data center, like the ones you see on TV, right? Like you walk into the man trap, you have your crash cart,
Right.
you put your belt on, and there's a box over there. So I took down Solaris E machines, HPUX builds, IBM P5s. It was just whatever came across my desk, we racked and stacked. And the first beautiful box that I saw was the HPUX system, and I fell in love. I was like, this is Unix? Like, I didn't know the difference between the two, flavors of Unix and Linux. But as I'm tearing this box down, we were putting RHEL 5 and 6 in. So we took down HPUX machines and built super micro RHEL 5 boxes to deploy for sysadmins. I can't believe I remember that. And then we were doing traces, cable traces into a crappy software called iTrace, I think it was. But basically, it's like you light up the box, you put your entries in it, and it builds. It starts provisioning the whole rack. But you had to do cable runs every ticket. So I hated those. I was the guy that was like hanging out in the data center trying to avoid the tickets. And I taught all the auditors how to do these cable runs in a scripted way. But I never left the data center. So eventually it caught up with me that I was cross-training these auditors. And the manager at the time said, hey, you got a little time in the data center overtime. You want to try to check that. And then following, a couple audits, they were like, hey, you never checked in at your desk workstation, which was a terminal. So she kind of slaps me on the wrist and says, well, and I repurposed these old ThinkPads for every auditor to use, which also had like a standalone Access database, a thin client for Windows, like a little tiny build. And I would drop all the cable runs on each contractor's system in the morning. So I was kind of shortcutting it to spend more time in the data center, hands on keyboard. So I eventually left that gig to surprisingly, height of the recession. And I'm making some choices in my life because, again, I was triple dipping sometimes between contracts. There's no secret, too. Back then, we had to take contracts on and full-time work.
Right.
So I look at today and all the things going on in the news. I'm like, oh, well, that's 20 years ago for me.
Oh, yeah, people were overemployed and things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a gimmick because how do you get a competitive rate, especially in New York, right? That's where I'm from, obviously, Mount Vernon, New York. Shout out to my city that I love. Hope it still loves me. But I would go down there 2 or 3 times in the evening, and then eventually I lost that gig. I left to go into the Apple store in Connecticut. Now for me, Connecticut was like the level up. It was like, oh my God, everybody's going this way. It's a beautiful city, but everyone that had gotten let go in the recession was heading the other way. That's what we say, heading towards Connecticut.
Mhm.
And that was probably one of the best teams I ever worked for. To be honest with you, they say it was a scrappy bunch of IT folks, people from Time Warner, but they all had this like kind of air, like, oh, we're better than you.
Gotcha.
But it was really the Apple like signal. I say to this day, like Apple tapped the signal and you must do it our way kind of thing. So I learned everything there was about tearing down their product line as a Mac genius. And then I started rehashing the analyst role on what services were available for Mac that could be used business to business. And we would collect leads at the bar. So I remember I had to step my game up and say, well, I'm going to try to catch as many business leads as possible. And I made it like a little competitive game with me and my buddies. And so whoever outpaced me or whoever would cross round, say, I would ask them, hey, did you have prior technical experience? Like, what did you do before the Apple Store? And to this day, they're some of my best buddies. When I eventually left after backing up an AT&T phone switch, the phone went down in the store, and a buddy named Janavi was on the phone saying, hey, we got AT&T on the line, and no one seems to be able to bring this switch back online. I did. I made a little
Okay.
back cable, and I took the old config over to this new over the phone pretty much with this technician to bring the phone system back online, and then I took a coffee break. So as I went to go to Starbucks on my 15, I come back, everybody's clapping. This is like this thing they did. If you left the store, if you got clapped out, but when I came back in, people were clapping. I was like, what's going on? It's like, yo, you don't know you brought the phone system? No, I'm drinking a coffee and I'm about to go back clock into the bar. That moment, Janavi pulls me aside and says, hey, I don't think you need to stay here. You need to go to a startup. What's that? Well, there's a startup in Connecticut called Datto I think you should check out.
See, that's what I got to cut you off a little bit because that's what blows me. People with natural talent and capability, right? Like, so like all of us have different journeys when it comes to it. Like, I'm a pure science dropout. I let everybody know that. I I was going to school full time. I was working full time. I was in Buffalo. It was before I joined the military, and I was sucking wind. I had like a 2.9, 2.8, something like that GPA.
I know.
I was struggling, right? Like you said, you had multiple jobs, try to go to school full time. But yeah, I had to roll out from computer science. But hearing people like you and Aisha Hollins and Elizabeth Stevens, like people who are just like natural tinkerers, like I break something down, I put it back together. And I met people like that in the military as well, right? I will get us there, but we're gonna take. It's like I need the AAA. What is it called? A triptych. Like I'm gonna get you there. I'm gonna get you over time. Like, but people, there are certain people who could just like break the box down in their mind and then like put it back together. That's the type of person I feel that you are every time we have a conversation, right? Like you said, you didn't even know you fixed the.
No, I didn't know what I was doing either. I'd be honest with you, I confront all these days later, act like I knew what I was doing, but I just kind of figured it out with the technician. And then so the issue was once the phones are down, you couldn't do nothing in the store. Like you couldn't back then anyway, before mobile pay and
Right.
everything, you couldn't really process inventory. You had orders coming in. You had a lot of stuff back of house is what we called it. So back of house might be down, but you could still do your job in the front of house, which was like the Genius Bar all the way literally to the front door of the store.
Okay.
Oh, and this I even forgot why they called me, but they thought I had a lot of network experience, and I did because I was in a data center before this job. But I had no clue what I was doing until the technician said, "Hey, we're gonna get a backup of the old switch." And then my eyes light up and my brain starts going. I'm like, well, one, I remember we could do it. Like I said, we had a whole array in the knock at Bloomberg. I said, I thought we needed a knock to that. He laughs. He's like, no, but it's on the old switch. Just plug it up. I'll walk you through making the cable, and then once you connect it, I'll walk you through bringing the image over to the
Gotcha.
new box. So that's some of the part that's on one ear. I'm on the phone with this guy, and the other ear I'm kind of getting chatted at, like get back to the bar. You're
Right.
not supposed to be doing it. So and I'm glancing over a few things because all the friends I made there, right, was because of the social engagement. And I don't like to think of myself as a socialite, but I like the experience with people. So the experience was, hey, you brought this back online and you saved us. And I was like, okay, great. I'm gonna go back to the Genius Bar and do my job.
Right.
We back online, and I took a little too long on the 15. So the buddies I made there, his name included, because shout out to him, I won't put his last name up, but he kind of saw what you saw. He said, man, this guy's talented. He jokes around, he plays at the bar, but when he's about business, he's about business. And so he introduced me to a startup that I actually brought all of my Apple buddies to called Datto. Now, back in the day, Datto, this is like '09 going into 2010. back then I didn't think that companies were backup and disaster recovery companies. I thought only the government did that. So the Navy saw this backup situation, a scenario of not only could you back up stores, but you can help what we call managed service providers restore their operations. So I'm the first man out of the store pioneering this new startup in Connecticut, which I didn't know. I took the bus there. And again, I was still living out of my car, back and forth between Connecticut and New York. And I said, all right, well, if I get this job, I'm gonna make a stay in Connecticut. I'm gonna try to make a legit stay and get stable in this job. And I went in like a three-piece suit, green decked out, nice shoes.
Gotcha.
And I go to the interview, and there's two guys. There was one guy that was also dressed up, but another guy in shorts and flip flops. And I'm like, where am I? I'm thinking like, oh my God, like this guy interviewing me is dressed down. And then at the time was a senior manager, and he got the word from a referral from Navy, but he's pressing me about my resume. Like, oh, you don't know Mac, you don't know enough Linux. What's the deal? How are we going to bring you into this startup? And I said, well, first of all, I probably know more Linux than anyone on the floor. And I was kind of pushing the buttons because I knew I had the ability to learn on the fly. And me and my buddy Andy today, to this day, I'm gonna tell you how he comes into play. We call it learning by doing. There's nothing that's gonna outpace me on the ground if I'm interested and can train others. So as soon as I
Gotcha.
say that in the interview, they cut me a low ball offer letter, but say get to work. And the first thing I had to do was restore Active Directory environments. As a jest, like, well, you're so nice at Linux, we're gonna take that away from you and put
Right.
you in the worst possible environments to work. And so back then, we would spin up these virtual instances on VirtualBox, which was Linux backend, Linux box, to restore different clients. I mean, there was tons of dental offices. I could keep going. The list was, first couple months was like a blur because people were calling. Imagine a help desk and they're down. So they're
Gotcha.
calling, most of the time they're down or they need their files restored or they need a full system rebuild. So the pressure was on to do these system rebuilds and virtual machine to physical or physical back to VM on this. Pretty
Okay.
much just a solid appliance. Think like Veeam today, but it was miles ahead of Veeam. I'll say that to anybody. So then my buddy gets wind of it. My buddy Andy, shout out to Andy Gomez. This is the first cat that I recruit to say, hey man, you're really better than me at Linux and infrastructure stuff. You should check out this startup. And from there, it was a skyrocket. We kept poaching people from our old store.
For your old organization, right?
Because they're like, and I'm not ashamed to say it now because I did it because I wanted to work with cool people. I didn't like the jobs before I was mostly by myself. I mean, I had cool people in the beginning, but I wanted to work with my friends and I wanted everyone to have a great time learning Linux. So from Andy's placement at the org, we skyrocketed and started picking out the most technical people in our old Genius Bar team.
Okay.
And so eventually we fast forward and I get promoted to a TSE, technical support engineer. It's like level 2, 3, right? And I'm sitting there making a joke about to my team, like, hey, this is not social hour, right? Like we got to put the work in. And by the end of these ticket runs, we're not going to be amateurs either. It's not going to be an amateur hour. So all these years later, that's what influenced the name for the Cyber Coffee Hour. Every time I
Okay.
would get off the floor, I would take a coffee break, just like I did in the Apple store. I would train up my guys, look at their cues, go through their map. Because we weren't follow the sun yet. It was only 32 people when I started. But eventually, a year or two in, I became a team lead and we were around 200 employees. 10% of that
Yeah.
population I remember was from my old Apple store. And the last guy we hired was a guy named Simon. And we met him at a pizza place where he had a Ubuntu tattoo on his arm. I was like, we got to get that guy. You don't wear an Ubuntu tattoo and
Right.
not come over here. And I tell the story to everybody. So I get happy thinking about it because just like you said, it wasn't no hot shot Linux dude or super guru. Like I hated school, to be honest with you. I'd say to this day, as much school as I've taken, I hate the whole thing about school where you got to follow a syllabus, get a certain GPA.
Right.
The format of even though mind you, I'm gonna get to this point too. Simon, brilliant guy, but everybody had a bad draw of the cards. So I said, man, if we don't get this guy, I'm done. And we did. We recruited him in, and he was a system engineer well until I got canned. And I'm gonna say how I got canned in a second. After about the last guy in, they came up with a program to say, let's have a finder's fee. Like let's have a fee for folks that recruited in. The last guy I got in was the cutoff. I said, dang, man, here it is. Here's all my homies here. And I didn't get any referral. And I didn't mind because I still love the work that they do and they did back then. So eventually, once I became a team lead, I tried 3 times to become a support manager, like a floor manager, incident response commander or floor manager, which we called cloud ops back then. So I didn't know the difference between help desk guy and infosec guy or
Okay. I see.
operations
Right.
guy. So 2 to 3 years in, they give me the opportunity to go to a software quality assurance team. Big mistake. I'm gonna say this because at the time I just figured out what software static analysis software testing, right? And dynamic analysis software testing. I learned it on that job, finding all the bugs that we would scan through a tool called Selenium. And at the time, I was pretty crappy at Python. I'm still am. I'm crappy. Like I'm still learning some of the flaws that I made back then. But I would basically find the bugs manually and write a suite of tests for every product that was there. Back then, it was the Gen 2 series, is what it was called. And I was pretty good at it. I got really good at it, and I was able to train folks and be trained by other developers. So the biggest part is you go from the support for now you're 2 steps away from the development team.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, so back in the day when we had escalations and it was a decent enough bug, a developer would come in your queue and try to solve it in prod. But if that bug was bad enough or didn't have any various exceptions, it would go to QA and get retested. And that's where I tend to like to thrive and say, hey, this is a broken build. That's the first time I learned that was at Datto. If there's 300 of these bugs, 30 of these bugs, it doesn't matter. The build is broken. And I was lucky to get to this job because they wanted to get rid of me. They wanted to fire me at the time for training folks on my support team how to find these bugs and how to mitigate them in prod. So the deal was, hey, go to QA, get some skills, learn how to code, and by the time you're good enough to move from, I think it was like QA level 2 to the next level would have been just shy of a senior QA lead. I got canned for asking for more money
Oh, man.
because I pushed the button to say, hey, I'm doing all this work, but I think it's time for me to get a raise. And I took vacation prior. And when I came back, I was separated from the company. So wind gets around and they're like, yo, you're the best guy I knew. Like, why you gotta go? And after that, a few more rounds of layoffs happened and the rest is history. I look back at it like I lost the best job of my career, because I asked for more money or I pushed the issue with less skill set is what I think about.
Yeah, but at the same time, like it's like that's the part that I as a small business owner, right? Like I get that you only have so much capital, so much funds to make certain things happen. But as an employee, I understand it's cheaper to keep her, right? Like it's easier to get
Grow
me
your
through
own.
to
Yeah.
grow me within as opposed to getting somebody new. I digress. Like I
But again,
think
I made it like a competition too. I'm not gonna just say one side of the story. I always like to compete. I always liked, and it wasn't real competition until I realized like my buddies were getting better. So the people I would cross train was like more collaborative and mentioning like, hey, you were right. And I don't really care about that part. I care that they learn. So a lot of it was not only is he good at learning the things he doesn't understand, though he's good at leading others. So I guess there was an influential part there. But then I didn't want to train people for free. I
right,
had did it before,
right,
but I was just
exactly.
like, most of these guys are better than me in coding. Most of them are like super smart. I mean, top of the top type kind of guys, right? But the issue was the pay. It's always the pay with me. And so many years later, when I finally left that job, I went to an air gap company called OWL. And they really put me on the chops because then I had to actually know Python through and through because we codified a air gap solution. Basically, think like a control system where you have the high side, which is all the operational IT stuff, OT stuff, excuse me, water treatment plants. I mean, you said you was in the military, right? So this was new to me, completely new. I thought this was like some mythical being because we tested a router, like your stay at home Soho or small business router, but I didn't know there was literally like a lights out, you will not connect to anything type device out there. So I learned that at OWL. And the high side was your operational networks, your water treatment plants, power plants, military bases, etc. And then the low side was commercial IT. So they were the first ones that taught me how to test a device like that on a contract. Right? So it was my first contract ever in my career where we kind of played the line between public and private sector.
Gotcha.
They were the middle acquisition team placing their product. They had OPDS and EPDS. So shout out to them because the OPDS was operational something, and EPDS was the high side, like the government side. So that was what I went to after Datto, but unfortunately my pop passed away, and I had to take leave to
Gotcha.
deal with my dad passing away. And that was a very emotional time for me because he was the one that got me to say, "Hey, you know what?" He saw the whole. God, I can't imagine him to say this. He saw the whole Snowden situation on the news. I'm just gonna put it out there, and he was like, "Junior, that guy sounds like something you do." And it's like, "What are you talking about, Pop?" He sounds like a sysadmin. Tell me more about that. I said, Pop, the sysadmins don't have much access, and much like now, I'm getting hyped. Even think about it. They shouldn't have that much access. There's no way he should be able to get to all those people. But he said, son, I think he's a social like you. And tell me about your school again. Now, back then I was on the fence about paying for school and going to Utica University. He
Right.
said,
Okay.
first time in my life, he's like, nah, don't worry, you got that. Go knock that out after that, before he passed away. Go knock that out before they need you to do cybersecurity, right? So this is like 2014. It took me 2 years to pay off my first undergrad and finally pay off my car when he passed
Gotcha.
away. And then I got in there. I got in there in 2018 and never looked back. Never stand still as their motto, and I didn't. I hit the ground running, and I did 3 master's degrees. As much as I hate school,
Yes, I saw that. I saw that in your LinkedIn profile. I was like, wait a minute.
so there's a hat trick to that. I hated school so much that one of the professors would allow me to cite Wired magazines. Because I would have I still have it to this. I have like rolled up magazines. I fold the pages in half. But I was reading Wired for War at the time. And I said to one of the professors, I said, yo, this guy, P.W. Singer, he's pretty on to something. Why can't I cite him in the paper? Well, find an institute that backs his writing and you could put him in the paper. But if you can't do that, then I'm going to fail you. He was really adamant about it, so he made the nickname Wired for me. And every day I would come in to this little senior seminar, he was, hey, Wired, what you got for me? And I'm like, well, today I got issue 47 with Kim Zetter in it. What now? And I wasn't trying to be braggadocious, but I really hated, catching the L for citing somebody that I like to read and see out there in media. So eventually, halfway through that degree, I found a hat trick to do 3 in 1. This is pretty much my context to say, well, if you tell me no once, I'm gonna want to know why. If you tell me no again, I'm gonna want to know how. And then, I'm gonna know what's wrong. And then the last third is how. How am I gonna get past this no? So the idea was
Okay.
to take half of the curriculum and split it between my research paper and cyber threat intelligence platforms. And it worked. It worked out for me. I did supposed to finish in a year, about 18 months, but I wound up staying there for 3 years.
Right.
To get the degree done, and it was piecemeal, right? My job would reimburse me sometimes. Again, I would work 2 jobs to cover it. I had a newborn daughter at the time, and I just put the hammer down. I said, "There's no way I'm not going to belong in this field, and I'm going to work 3 times harder." And I did. Now, that school was a blessing because they had a crime lab and the whole shebang for cyber operations. It's one of the best schools I could say I went to in my whole career because it was real world folks that worked there teaching us.
Right. And that was Utica, right?
Utica
Okay.
University now,
Shout out to
yeah.
Utica.
Yeah, shout out to Utica.
Yeah.
Uticans never stand still, Man. So that's it. That's where I'm at. I mean, I could keep going.
Right. No. So, because I don't want to bust the hour. I was just going to have you. I might have to have you back on. But so
Word.
let's jump to the cyber coffee hour, right? So we got the name, but what was the number one, the connection, right, between you and Dr. Joseph, and then how'd you guys come together to collaborate to make the podcast?
This
the
puts a
cyber coffee
smile.
hour.
Yeah, this puts a smile on my face because every time we tell a story, we always say go back to our beta episodes when we really reconnected and didn't know what we were doing.
Gotcha.
So we were kind of learning. We were high school buddies, right? He was a couple years older than me. We were in the same JRTC unit back 20-something years ago. So life happens. We split. He goes in the Air Force. I don't make it and go into IT. Many years ago, we had a buddy named Gibbs, many years later, many moons later, that says, hey, I think you guys are in the same field. How do y'all not know about each other? Now, he's down south. He's like in Huntsville. I'm in Virginia. Dr. Joseph's in Virginia. He's literally an hour away from me. So he sends me his cell phone number. He said, man, you got to call this guy because I think he's doing a doctorate. I know you just finished your master's. How many did you get? I said, well, I got 3. He's like, damn, like you really got to talk to this guy. And I said, Gibbs, chill out. We haven't talked in about 15 years. What makes you think that this guy wants to hear anything from me? Well, I think y'all working at the same place. And I think y'all doing the same thing. What is that, cyber operations? Yeah, buddy, that's what I'm doing. And I gave him a call, and he literally tells me he's an hour down the road and working in the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I was on the way out of a big bank into a contractor for a Homeland Security.
Right.
So I couldn't win the lottery the same way. So
right.
Initially, he hits me and he says, hey, I'm doing this paper on dissertation on electrical grid. And I heard you're like infatuated with critical infrastructure. Would you mind defending my dissertation? Absolutely. Hell yeah, let's do it. And so about 3 hours into the call, man, we had the best material ever, right? And we said to ourselves, like, well, one, only the school is going to see this, and only the professional, peer reviews are going to see that content. How do we keep it going? And so the Cyber Coffee Hour was born. I said, hey, first of all, we didn't know. We always thought we were by ourselves for 15-something years. Felt like I was, besides the Apple Store and Datto, I felt like I was on my own. running and gunning, surviving, right? He said the same thing, but for the public side. I said, well, why is there never a show that talks about both? And so from there, we made the agreement. One, we're going to go into the podcast industry first. We didn't know how we were going to do it, right? And then thank you for welcoming us here too, because we looked at your show and said, hey,
Yeah, absolutely.
these
Yeah.
brothers got it going on. We got to link up with them. The second thing was we said we have to form as a business entity to protect our content. Because that's what took us the longer part of our formation. We really, actually, the ninth will be hitting 3 years.
Okay. There
Yeah.
you
So
go.
2 years prior to that, we were kind of in the research mode, looking at you folks like you and Shannon. The other buddy you had on too, I think he was a UFC fighter.
Yeah, LaVon Maynard. Yeah, yeah.
Levi Maynard. He's the one that I said, oh man, he's right. Like he said, it's no secret that we're out here working 2 jobs. It's like, yo, this guy is right. And I don't remember how long ago it was, but I know it was a while ago. And then the other one was Hacker Valley. So we stacked ranked ourselves and said, well, wherever we come in, we want to gel with these guys and get out here as quickly as possible.
Yeah, his content's dope too. Like,
Yeah.
production value's crazy high.
So after Dr. Joseph and I shook on it, we formed up and we hit the ground running. And we're telling the stories inside and outside of cyber. So inside being mostly what you see now today, the public side, the federal government, all the folks that have a tenure, coming out to folks that are newbies trying to get in. So I'm the outside trying to get in and cross-train folks while he's coming with more tenure and leadership. And I'm kind of like the hands on keyboard side. We're like, this is how we're going to run the gauntlet. It's like where we meet in the middle is, well, who else is not telling these stories? And who else might need someone like us to influence people like us, look like us, and getting into cybersecurity? Because it is a gauntlet. The hardest thing I would say about this industry is not just get in, it's staying in and being proficient in the field. So we agreed on that, and that's how we really just made the episodes from that agreement, formally and informally. Say, well, as long as we get the message, I would feel like we encourage more folks to come into this industry.
That's dope. So, because I think initially Dr. Joseph hit me up, like either asked me a question or I forget how we engaged with each other, but then I saw you guys had the Cyber Coffee Hour, so I was like, okay, I definitely want to start talking to you guys because it was Cyber Coffee Hour, it was Stats on Stats, it was them tech folks. Like I started to see a lot more of us in the space, so I was like, I gotta definitely hook up with these people, talk to them, pick their brain, right? We just had a great conversation. I had them on the Ask a CSSP, and I was like, I gotta get both of y'all on.
Nice.
The show at some point, right? We had that crossover episode. So I definitely want to do more content like that. So everybody, continue to tune in for more of that. But where do you see the Cyber Coffee Hour the next 3 to 5 years? Because that's going to also, because I want to piggyback off of that already, right? So where do you see you and your career in the next 3 to 5 years as well, right? How do the two intertwine?
So as you can see, I'm very passionate. I do see a lot with the Cyber Coffee Hour that's humbled me. So the first side of it is to protect the Cyber Coffee Hour and try to make an organization that can fund it, the research. I'm pretty much racking and stacking my brain to figure that part out to get us some runway to stay for the 5 to 10. The reason why it is because the Cyber Coffee Hour is the longest company I've worked for straight, 5 years, right? No other company have I sat in the same headcount. And I have a new opportunity now. I'm not going to talk about too much yet, maybe on the next episode.
Gotcha.
For me, the most humbling factor is how do I get an organization off the ground and protect it so the content doesn't get shut down? And now we're hitting that 5-year mark quintessentially. 3 to 5 years from now, I would hope that we're an information sharing organization and research firm. But
Okay.
again, that's one side of the house. The other side of the house, I don't really think it's going to be like a true world media company yet, but it would be more like a lab to train folks and record the content that we bring out to the Cyber Coffee Hour. And that's it in short. I mean, I'm not going to act like I have the whole roadmap. I'm kind of like wheeling and dealing to be an influence in this industry, but also harden up the show so it outlasts us pretty much.
So I see similarities. So you see a lot of the companies I've worked for. Well, I've only worked for a couple, right? Only a couple since I've been out of the military. But what you'll see is that they already are an established either GRC consultancy. I can't really speak today, so please excuse me, people who are listening. Consultancy, there you go, GRC consultancy, or a MSP or MSSP or what have you, and they want a podcast because they want to use it as marketing and business development. There's nothing wrong with that. That's more of a traditional path. But just like yourselves, we're a media company per se, which is turning ourselves into a business. So I see a lot of similarities in that. Like your approach is going to be different, right? Because you guys are different people, you have different experiences, what have you. But the end result is we're kind of, it feels like we're like going downstream as opposed to upstream. Like it feels like people who have a established business, like trying to establish a podcast and get a tone and a vibe and all that stuff. Second, after the establishment of their business, it seems like that's an upstream battle. Like a company I was working for recently, they're on the path of doing the same. But it's like, how do I get the tone? Where's the texture? Who's the host? Yada yada yada. As opposed to coming together like Voltron, right? Like where you already know someone, you already have that vibe and that consistency, right? Like you're not building that type of relationship. You already have that relationship. And I was like, hey, people are listening. We're helping people break in, right? Like we have a circle that's getting bigger with other podcasts that are have people who look like us, who have, similar experiences as us. And now how do we turn this to a business? So for whatever reason, that feels easier per se in quotation marks, as opposed to doing the opposite where you got to like, no one's going to be a Joe Rogan overnight, right?
The
Like,
hardest challenge I've
yeah.
noticed is, to your point, right, is showing up. So I was always nervous about showing my face, being a socialite, being public on the camera and talking to the content, because I literally protect this content for most of my career. So Dr. Joseph broke me out of that and said, hey, what happens if somebody has your story and wants to see your struggles and experiences? So that was the light bulb and the most humbling advice he gave me. The second side, to your point, is the engagement's easier when I'm passionate about it. When I'm passionate about it, it's not hard to find a guest, run the ball, and figure out which content we're going to put up. He does most of the front of house work, and I do the back house office, just like MSS. Hardest thing now that's more humbling is we intentionally built it on LinkedIn, right, to get the lead generation, which we thought we didn't know what we were doing at first was going to work to get the viewership and engagement, which is the hardest thing right now, right? A lot of people, when you're training in cybersecurity, are mentioning a learning curve. People don't really dial into that right away until it becomes engaging, because that's what we're really trying to do, is really engage folks and say, this is the content that we brought to the industry, right? And we're in the industry too. So that's the other thing that I noticed that works out for both of us and both of our shows, is that we're still out here in the cyber trenches, like you said, the last couple episodes, right?
Right.
You can see me in any conference. You can see Dr. Joseph studying for the CISSP, Security Plus as well, and we're still running the gauntlet through our show. The biggest thing I could say to your point, is the most challenging thing is actually how do we turn it into a service provider?
Right. And yeah, I can see the challenge in that as well.
Mhm.
Another thing that I like, right? Like when we talk about, I keep saying texture because I'm in the process of trying to write something. And that's kind of what my write coach said. You want to add texture, right? So I'm talking about like the snow crushed beneath my feet when I was in Buffalo and had to walk from X to Y. So you have that storytelling or whatever, that narrative. I like so when people listen to earlier in the episode, they're going to see the genesis, right? Like where you started from to where you're at, and then all of what you had to learn in between. And I think a lot of that is being lost because you have a lot of, I'm not trying to bash anybody's platform, right? But yeah, I feel as though you have a lot of people who are kind of taking advantage of people who are trying to break in, right? Like, because
Yeah,
like
100%.
cyber's been around for decades, right? But it's only been part of pop culture for like 5 to 10 years. People actually know what cybersecurity is, right? Because they've lost their identity, or they're getting text messages and emails and having to do phishing training and things of that nature, right? So now it's becoming part of the cultural zeitgeist, so to speak. However, people feel as though I can sell you a 8 to 12 week boot camp and you could be a cybersecurity professional. And I,
Right.
I, I like your guys' content, as well as like Stats on Stats, them tech folks, where they are, and them DEM, Develop Every Mind tech folks is the name of their platform. Like,
Like that. I
yeah,
just
yeah,
added
it's
them on
dope.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But it's I had to learn how to do this, right? Like you talk about being at the help desk, you talk about how you're giving tasks and you're like, again, because you're competitive and very intelligent. So you're like, okay, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to do better than everybody else. And I'm not saying that people are coming in lazy, they're coming in misinformed. So I like how you guys are not, blowing smoke up people's, rear ends and saying like, oh yeah, you could be a CSSP and get that entry level job that's being advertised on X or Y or Z platform, which is just not the case. I see a lot of people who are disheartened by it, and that kind of irks me because it's not a person's fault for wanting to. They see something, they're like, okay, it's 7 figures, I can take this boot camp, like why not, right? But they're being hustled out of their money and they're being frustrated when they can't break in, and that part I don't like.
So here's the secret coffee. I don't like it either because I think that's the most. It's mostly like the fraudulent actors that we go against, right? They see the need, especially now. People are losing their jobs. Some people are putting their houses up. We know the whole situation in the DMV area, but I really look at those people the same as the fraudsters. So my ace card is the same way I combat the fraudsters is by collaboration and information sharing. We all can run the gauntlet together because I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm never claimed to be, right? But my competitive nature is together we'll be smarter than the adversary, right? So a lot of times, to your point, when I see stuff like that, I gotta go in. I gotta reach more people because, and again, when I was by myself, it was 1-to-1. Right, me to Brother Joseph, Dr. Joseph. Then it was Dr. Joseph to his audience and his cascade of professional network. So that's why we build it on LinkedIn. And the hardest thing about this is the collaboration to say this is the message we want to show you that's not being shown in the industry because of these boot camps, right? They kind of make it like, like you said, fluff. Like anybody can get the Security Plus. I failed the Security Plus 3 times in 2016, right? I want people to know that, just because you fail, take the hit and keep going.
Right.
Because
Right.
it is worth it when you put the work in and fail a couple times, and then you wind up thriving and surviving in this industry.
Yeah. Yeah. That was me in
So
the
that's,
CCNA. I was banging my head on the wall. I was like, yo.
man, that's back when it was good too. Like the Cisco Academy was off the ground.
Oh man.
The CCIE started to glow back then. Like, oh my God. Yeah.
You're a god. If you had a CCI, oh man. Yeah, CCIE, you were, because it
What
like
do you set up cities overnight? Like
and they
exactly.
still are. Like every time I run into a CCIE, they have a backstory. Like that's not a fly by night exam
No,
either, right? Like you're not just
no.
gonna like, oh, I'm going to study for 6 months to get my CCIE. Like, okay, you're gonna waste your money.
But that's what the fraudsters say. That's what but see, isn't it better when you hear like, yo, I failed that thing twice. Let's go study together. So Dr. Joseph has a study hall like that, right? So he's doing that right now for the CISSP. And then the other part that I kind of like is do a lab. Hey, remember Packet Trace? Remember all these tools that was kind of lost on a generation. To your point, a generation of cyber is going by now, right? This thing is maturing and it's actually becoming pretty dangerous out in the streets to go out there and not be trained up. So a lot of things that I like is like the home labs. Those are coming back. The try hack me's, the hack the boxes, the real ones that show you like Linux is only the beginning step, but you would be better equipped if you failed that Linux Plus, wouldn't you? Right. So a lot of times, I think the advantage is sure take the L, brush your shoulders or go to a conference and figure out how you could do it there. If you need help, come with me. We'll go and tackle it together. I think that's the best thing that I haven't seen in a few years because of the boot camps. The pay as you
Right.
go paywall boot camps want you to give $100,000 a year, promises because the sky's the limit when those places don't exist. You can make way more than that if you just grind and stick to a routine and then do it as a team with a mentor. Right. So the biggest thing, the most humbling thing about the Cyber Coffee Hour is I have to now learn how to be a better mentor for folks in this adverse times. Right. So that was one thing that we
Absolutely.
tried to say, how do I learn how to be a mentor of mentors and also take on new mentees? So that was my grace from the show is
Gotcha.
folks will reach out and say, how do I get into cyber? And I had to come together and say, you got to grind. You're gonna take an L, but don't worry about it. And when you do take the L, learn how to keep moving. Right. So that's the biggest part that I think I take away from our show is that people reach out now. They're like, "Oh, we have great content. We like your content." And that for me was humbling. I didn't think I was gonna be, a content creator.
Yeah, no, and then it's very surprising. It's getting over the hump, right? Because like the first couple episodes are pretty daunting. Like I tell people, like at least do 7 episodes, and then you could say you don't like it, right? Because initially I was like, I don't think it's gonna work out. Like me, Levon, and Shannon were doing it. It was really just to get me out of I was in COVID lockdown, so it was to get me out of my hotel room to be around friends and chat it up. So we were able to keep it going once it was I was able to leave my hotel room and start doing work. But a lot of people don't make it past 7. So I'm like, if you could get 7. Then you can keep it moving. Now we're like 860 or something like that, right? It just keeps rolling. But I want to go because you jogged my memory, right? You brought up a memory. Well, after the second time I failed the CCNA, I went to work and we had a bunch of 8-port Cisco Power over Ethernet switches, right? So I signed out 2 8-port PoE switches, and I made a bunch of because we had a bunch of spare Cat 5 cable. I made a bunch of crossover and straight through cables. And I took it home, right? I signed it out. I took it
Home
home
lab.
and just had to lab it up. I forgot all about that. Like that was a thing, right? Because when it was time for me to finally PCS or for the people who were listening who were not military, right? When it was time for me to move, I had to find those switches. And they were
Oh, they were looking for them.
yeah, they were like, hey, remember you signed this out a year ago? And I was like, oh yeah, I signed it up before I took the third time to the CCA and I finally passed it, right? So yeah, it's hard work, but it's well worth it, right? Because like you said, you have the passion, then it makes it fun. It makes you want to push through, persevere, and then make it happen.
And then you don't want to let anyone down. So for me as a civilian, a lot of the stuff, I hate to say this, but a lot of companies just threw out a lot of stuff. So,
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
if I had a mentee or I had some, hey, come with me to pick this up at the loading dock, and I'm not ashamed to say it now, but as I think about it, like, yeah, a lot of the companies would throw out Cisco gear. They would throw out, two super micro chassis.
Mhm.
And then I would turn that into lab. And then a lot of times too, when you show somebody like, look, this is what they're wasting, how can we build it more efficiently? That's what I think a lot of folks, especially today with the cloud, you don't see that like backhaul of spend until you look at your Amazon account or if you look at your, and I'm not knocking the young ones today. I think you should do both. You should look at like
But
your
yeah,
smaller home labs, your Raspberry Pis, and then figure out how not to scale too high in the cloud. Because the cloud today is ridiculous spend to me. Ridiculous amounts to spend. Not to knock anybody, but you can't have somebody pay to learn. In my personal and professional opinion, you should have the most free, smallest lab right by your desk, and then have somebody saying, "Hey, this is how we could do it better. This is how we could
mhm.
collaborate and make it more efficient." Hopefully, we'll see that with the downturn that's going on in cyber, but I'm really concerned that people are going to get lost in the industry thinking that they have to go to these boot camps for sure because
Yeah,
they
yeah,
don't see the alternatives.
right. And yeah, because I had a buddy of mine reach out to me and ask me, and he's in the medical field, right? So he's doing very well, but he's like, hey, it's a side hustle. I might want to, dabble in this. I said, that's cool. The camp that you sent me, because you sent me a link to the boot camp, it was like 8 weeks, and then you're a cybersecurity professional. I was like, don't do that.
Mm.
I was like,
Yeah,
if you're really interested in doing it, like I'm not going to knock it. Like with your background in health, like if you had IT as well, that'd be a lot of brain power going on time, but you would be truly a unicorn at that point.
yeah.
But you got to do it the hard way. Like there are no shortcuts. You're going to have to lab it up, like you said. You're going to have to study and research it if you have the time. But you're out here working 12-hour shifts stuff like that. Like, do you have the time to make both those things happen? Like some people do, some people don't.
Well, yeah, we had a guest. So we actually had two guests that humbled me a lot. So one was Dr. Angela Holiday Bell. Excuse me if I messed up her name, but she made a book, Don't Sleep on the Job, I think.
Okay.
And I realized, like, at this time, I hadn't slept from a previous job. And I missed her episode because of that. And I said, well, dang, you're right. Like, the strain that you don't see in this industry is a lot of us are losing sleep to stay in the industry. So the best example we can give folks is, hey, like you said, don't lose sleep over the $1,500 boot camp, right? Take a little lab, take your time and do it in 16 weeks. Right. And that commitment is you get to sleep easier at night without
Mhm.
racking your brain. The other side, we had a guest, Tony Owens, when around our six, like you said, six, maybe 11, going into the like really back end of our first season. Hey, why aren't you guys on YouTube?
There you
And
go.
I was humbled. I was like, yeah, you know what? What? So first of all, I heard all the rumors about everybody quitting YouTube. So I was pretty apprehensive, like, well, we got to get a following. We got to use our LinkedIn network. And then one day, the following week after Tony Owens episode, shout out to Tony, we're like, you know what? Let's just dive into YouTube. Forget it, right? And see what
Right.
happens, right? And so we're trying to mold that a little bit more to funnel our LinkedIn network to the channel. So you'll see on my LinkedIn now, it'll say hello coffee makers, and that's our link
Mhm.
tree link.
Gotcha.
So you can find all our socials there. But like you said, I'm having fun because I'm learning while doing it. Now I'm not following the algorithms and things in the background because I know there's probably hundreds and hundreds of people that need to hear these stories.
Right.
To your point.
Right, absolutely, and you bring up a good point. Like, so I've never been discouraged about our numbers. I'm always that happy that somebody wants to listen to it, right? So, like,
Right.
you think about like an auditorium is usually like 500 people. So if I'm hitting like auditorium levels, like I'm doing some good stuff right there, right? When I talk about movers and shakers, things of that nature. But I also thought about it like one day, once I grow Ram Cyber, right? Once I grow the other side of the firewall, I can hire somebody to fix the algorithm part, right? I don't have to specialize in everything. Like a small business owner usually wears multiple hats, but
Mm.
that's a beast I don't want to tackle, right? Like the content's there. I do my best to label it and get it ready for people. I push people towards it. If I never hit, like, how you have all those bars when you can earn certain
Oh
privileges
my
on
God.
YouTube. If my bar never fills all the way up, I will not be heartbroken. You
Mm.
know what I mean? But if I ever do have the cap space to bring somebody on who knows how to fill that bar up, then by all means, like have at it. Like dig through this archive, do your thing. But I'm not gonna ever chase that metric because it's just um it's too daunting of a task when that's not really. I'm not going for that, right? I'm not a Kai Sinai. I'm not a Drewski, right? I'm not a content creator who's looking to bring in the masses. I'm like you said, like if it's 100 people out there that need to hear my story, then cool. 100 people get it. 300 people, 500 people, it doesn't matter. If 3 people right? It's like I'm helping somebody and giving them the advice that was somebody had given me when I started out. So it's all good. And then, I'll get there when I get there. It is what it is.
I think I respect it because we take the pioneers route, right? Like you're gonna look at the city that you established and say Ram Cyber brought all these folks into the industry. So I think I borrowed. I'm not gonna give full credit for that. If you can see it up there, I got Doak's book, and
Okay.
my business coach is also a high school buddy, right? I'll shout him out in another episode too. But he also said, "Look, what would you do? How different would the world be without Cyber Coffee Hour?" And that was the hardest question I ever
Mhm.
asked because now it's not just the fellowship. You're kind of letting folks down who had aspired to get in this industry if we don't show up. So I like the
Very true.
pioneers. I like the pioneers route that you mentioned too, like starting a company to protect the Cyber Coffee Hour. Just to your point, and even a tertiary, like it's almost like the active failover, right? One company needs to supplement the other so the other's lights don't go off. That's it. And for me, I didn't know about this company man stuff until I started my own. Right until I started the Cyber Coffee Hour, I watch startups and I kind of look at their formation and stuff, but that's a distraction. What I didn't realize is the fellowship comes when you start to say, "Hey, I can lead myself and lead others." Borrowing from my buddy Chappie Brown, and then once I can lead others, I can change the world. So all of this is coming into the content that I create in our unique context, like you said, the crunchy snow, right? The texture. Everybody can still exist in the same market without disrupting each other because there's a need now that we see in cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I usually go towards that adversity. Like, look, not like this grand, shepherd or anything, but I want people to know, like, you got to be tough enough to get in and stay in this industry, as we see it now in the news, right? And then behind the scenes, yes, what does it look like to hire a content creator?
Yeah.
To your point, like, I don't even know what the bars are the distraction because they're driving a metric for YouTube's. Nothing against it. We're still out there, right? We're still on YouTube. Hopefully they'll send us checks one day. But the other part of it is when you start to look at, like you said, Doak, Just Notified, Tech Textual, Hacker Valley, all these folks, yourself, all these folks I researched say, oh, we got to all show up. We all got to, because my biggest thing is all ships can rise together. Right. So all of
Very
them can
true.
rise together. And there's, instead of the company, yes, I could be smart, but there's always somebody smarter than me. Right. I want to know who that is. And then in that smart competitive nature, we can collaborate. There's nothing that can stop this cross posting algorithm that YouTube
Right.
is. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So before I let you go, because I want all this to fit on the radio episode. So I definitely want to make sure we're up before this month is out. So top 5. So you're from New York as well, right? So Mount Vernon, New York in the house. You don't rep the Bills, it's okay.
Nah.
All right.
I have a cousin that does, but not.
You repping those New Jersey teams because they play in Jersey. That's fine. But who's your top 5? I would say let's go rep top 5 because we're almost the same age group.
Oh man, that's good. So you hit the like canonical. I'm not really following rap as much nowadays that I'm older, but I could say definitely Kendrick. Had the
and it could be any dead alive, any time frame.
Yeah, we definitely gonna go back to Big L.
Okay.
Diplomats. I was a huge Diplomat fan 20 years ago. I went to their first concert down in Fordham, and I had I'll send you the photo. I had the T-shirt. I was all decked out. I thought I was a Diplomat, right? Busta Rhymes, obviously. I love Busta Rhymes to this day. And then the last one I have to say is a new cat. Damn, not Kid Cudi. It's another one. I can't remember the brother's name. I'm probably gonna get clowned. But that's the top 5. So Busta, Diplomats, the whole Diplomat collaboration.
Gotcha. Okay.
Big L, obviously before then they predated. We're a little older, right? My cousins listen. Oh, and then of course Mobb Deep.
There you go. Okay.
Definitely, because they shout out Mount Vernon, and anybody that knows, they shout out Mount Vernon in several of their albums. So Mobb Deep is the last one running it before G Unit. So I don't, my brother loves G Unit, and I said, nah, I remember when they collaborated, and I said, yo, they're the only ones that shouted out Mount Vernon. Gotcha. And then 50 shouted out Yonkers. So I kind of said, all right, I can listen to G Unit, but you got to remember Mobb Deep was out there before then, shouting out Westchester County,
Okay. All right. Respectful list. Not my list, but respectful list. You threw Diplomats on there. I'm very surprised.
Man, listen.
No Benny the Butcher, no West Side Gunner.
Because you know what it was? It was getting on the train, and Harlem was, the next stop after Fordham. So that was me. Like I went to the concert in the beginning of them forming up. So.
All right, so I got to land this plane. We definitely got to do this again because there's so much more to unpack on your backstory, your current initiatives, all that good stuff. But I think this was a good outline of Alfredzo Nash, the Cyber Coffee Hour, right? In your collaboration with Dr. Joseph. So definitely continue to hit us up at all the websites to go by our name, The Other Side of the Firewall, The Other Side of the FW, or Ask a CISSP. You can find me at RY Security Guy. That's RY Security Guy, pretty much everywhere, but LinkedIn is where I'm most active. And where can they find you and your content, Alfredzo?
So right now, if you go to my LinkedIn, you can find our new link tree on my profile. Say hi to Coffee Makers. You can also find us on Blue Sky, LinkedIn again, YouTube, and a bunch of other socials that I just stood up last week.
Gotcha. And it'll all be in the description. All right. Stay safe. Stay secure.